The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the forecourt of Windsor Castle, glinting off the polished buttons and brass of the Queen's Guard. For the hundreds of tourists gathered, it was the quintessential London scene. The silent, stoic soldier in the famous bearskin cap, pacing his post with metronomic precision. Among the crowd that day was a man who watched the scene, not with casual interest, but with a cocky, analytical eye. His name was Marcus, and he was a man who had built his identity on being untouchable. Marcus was a karate champion, a man who had spent over 15 years honing his body into a weapon. His dojo in Birmingham was adorned with trophies and medals, testaments to his speed, power, and precision. He could shatter boards with his fists and move with a speed that left opponents bewildered. And this physical prowess had seeped into his psyche, creating a quiet but powerful belief that he was, in a very real sense, superior. The rules that applied to ordinary people, the physical limitations that bound them, he felt, didn't quite apply to him. He saw the world as a series of challenges to be conquered, tests of skill and will. The motionless Royal Guard, a symbol of discipline and tradition, presented itself to him as the ultimate test. To his friends, a group of lads on a day out in the capital, Marcus's idea was a hilarious prank. "Go on, Marcus, show him what a real fighter looks like," one of them goaded, nudging him. "Bet he doesn't even flinch. They're trained not to, but they've never been hit by you," another added with a laugh. The alcohol from their pub lunch, combined with the intoxicating attention of his peers, clouded Marcus's judgment. The boundary between a harmless joke and a serious transgression began to blur. He looked at the guard, a young man who looked to be about his own age, standing rigidly in a scarlet tunic, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his heavy fur cap. The soldier's face was a mask of stone, betraying no emotion, no awareness of the bustling crowd just inches from his post. Fueled by bravado, and the misguided belief that his martial arts prowess placed him outside the bounds of normal consequence, Marcus made his move. He stepped past the velvet rope, a clear boundary that every other tourist respected. A few people in the crowd gasped, sensing something was about to happen. Marcus's friends raised their phones, expecting a moment of viral glory. The champion didn't throw a full-powered punch. In his mind, this was just a tap, a demonstration. He drew back his right hand and struck the soldier directly in the chest, just below the left epaulette. The thud of the impact was audible in the sudden hush that fell over the onlookers. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. The guard remained motionless, his gaze fixed forward. A ripple of nervous laughter started from Marcus's friends. See? Nothing. But Marcus, whose entire life was dedicated to understanding physical confrontation, saw something they didn't. He saw the almost imperceptible tightening of the soldier's jaw, the slight shift in his stance as his weight settled onto the balls of his feet. The man hadn't staggered. He had absorbed the blow and prepared. Then the aftermath began. The guard did not break his formation. He did not shout or chase Marcus. His reaction was far more terrifying than any show of aggression. In a movement that was both swift and perfectly controlled, he brought his rifle, a modern L-85 assault rifle with a fixed bayonet, from the shoulder arms position to a horizontal port arms position across his body. The movement was crisp, mechanical, and final. The polished steel of the bayonet caught the sunlight, a clear and undeniable warning. But it was the sound that truly shattered Marcus's world. From beneath the bearskin cap, the guard's voice boomed out, not in a scream, but in a command of such immense institutional power that it seemed to vibrate in the air itself. It was the voice of a man who was not speaking for himself, but for the entire British Army, for the Crown, for centuries of unbroken tradition. The words were a rehearsed, formal challenge, a protocol triggered by a direct physical assault. "Stand back from the Queen's Guard!" Marcus froze. This wasn't a command he could dodge or counter. It was a force of nature. The sheer authority in the voice bypassed his fighter's brain entirely. In the dojo, he understood aggression. He understood opponents. He did not understand this. He stood there, dumbfounded, his hand still stinging from the impact on the soldier's rigid breastplate. The bravado that had propelled him forward evaporated instantly, leaving behind a cold knot of pure dread in his stomach. The single command was the match that lit the fuse. In the next instant, chaos erupted. From doorways and guard huts that Marcus hadn't even noticed, other guards appeared. They didn't run in a panicked mob. They moved with a coordinated, terrifying efficiency. Their boots pounded on the cobblestones in unison, a sound like approaching thunder. Suddenly, the lone soldier was no longer alone. He was the tip of a spear. Within seconds, Marcus was surrounded by a wall of red tunics and gleaming bayonets, all pointed unwaveringly in his direction. The tourists, who had been laughing and filming moments before, scrambled back, their phones now capturing a scene of genuine high-stakes tension. The playful atmosphere was gone, replaced by the stark reality of a security breach at one of the world's most famous royal residences. This was the aftermath Marcus hadn't been ready for. He was prepared for a one-on-one confrontation, a physical challenge. He was utterly unprepared for the state. He was unprepared for the system. The guards formed a tight cordon around him, and their faces as impassive as the first. They didn't need to be martial arts champions. Their power came from their unity, their discipline, and the institution they represented. One guard spoke into a small radio on his wrist, his eyes never leaving Marcus. Marcus, the karate champion, felt his legs go weak. He raised his hands slowly, palms out, a gesture of surrender he had never made in his life. The fight-or-flight response that had served him so well in competition was useless here. Flight was impossible. He was penned in. Fight was suicidal. These men were not opponents in a tournament. They were soldiers with loaded weapons and the legal authority to use them. The standoff lasted only a few minutes, but for Marcus, it felt like an eternity. He could hear the frightened whispers of the crowd, and the nervous questions of children asking their parents what was happening. He saw the look of sheer terror on his friends' faces, their earlier mockery replaced by horrified disbelief. The police arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd to take control of the situation. The guards, their duty done, did not relax. They simply created an opening for the police to step in, their bayonets still at the ready until Marcus was securely in the hands of the constables. As the police officers firmly gripped his arms and led him away, Marcus caught a final glimpse of the soldier he had punched. The man was already back at his post, standing exactly where he had been before, his rifle returned to the shoulder arms position. His face was again a mask of stone. He wasn't looking at Marcus. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was just staring ahead, a silent, immovable fixture once more, as if the entire terrifying incident had never happened. That was perhaps the most humbling part of all. To the guard, Marcus wasn't a worthy adversary, or even a memorable one. He was just a momentary interruption in an otherwise quiet day of duty. At the police station, Marcus was charged with common assault and breach of the peace. In the cold, stark light of the holding cell, the reality of his situation crashed down on him. The champion who could break boards with his fists couldn't break through the steel door. The man who had faced down opponents in tournaments was now just another prisoner, identified by a number on a plastic band around his wrist. He was released on bail, but the story was far from over. His face, his name, and the video of his stupidity were all over the internet. The headlines wrote themselves, "Karate champion KO'd by Royal Guard's words. Idiot tourist learns painful lesson." The mockery was relentless. The public shaming was brutal, but it was the internal shame that was truly transformative. He had to return to his dojo in Birmingham to face his students and his sensei. The man who had once preached discipline and respect had become a viral symbol of their absence. His sensei, an elderly Japanese man named Tanaka, who had taught Marcus since he was a boy, did not shout at him. He simply sat him down in the center of the dojo floor and made him watch the video over and over again on a phone. They watched in silence for nearly an hour. Finally, Sensei Tanaka spoke. "You see this?" he asked, pointing at the guard. "This is a black belt. Not on his uniform, but in his spirit. He does not need to prove his strength. He is strength. You needed to prove yours. You are still a white belt." Those words cut deeper than any punch Marcus had ever thrown or received. He realized that for all his physical training, his spiritual and emotional discipline was a sham. He had mistaken the ability to fight for the wisdom to know when not to. The aftermath of his foolish act became his new, brutal dojo. He withdrew from competition. He spent his nights writing letters of apology to the British Army, to the Ministry of Defense, and to the specific regiment of the Queen's Guard. He never received a reply, but the act of writing them was a form of penance. Months later, the story faded from the news, but it never faded from Marcus. He still taught karate, but his lessons had changed, and he no longer focused on winning trophies. He taught his students about the power of restraint, about the strength found in stillness. He would often show them a picture on his phone, not the video of his punch, but a photo he had taken on a subsequent quiet visit to Windsor. It was a picture of a single, solitary guard, standing sentinel. He would point to the photo and tell his students, "That is the most powerful man I have ever met. He didn't move, he didn't fight, and he defeated me completely. True strength isn't about what you can do. It's about what you choose not to do." The karate champion had finally learned the most important lesson of his life, not from a master in a dojo, but from a silent soldier on a cobblestone forecourt. A lesson delivered in the deafening, humbling aftermath of his own arrogance.